and welcome to Conservatives Talk.
We've got a pretty good show this week.
We absolutely do.
I mean, honestly, would someone teach Democrats how to read?
And could the EPA ruling trip up federal gun grabbers?
Democrats, yet again, go after private businesses.
And a judge delivers a blow to Fulton County DA's witch hunt.
Also, Buck was right
Don't you do it.
about the white nationalist summer.
You did it.
Just ask the FBI.
And welcome to Conservatives Talk. My name's Justin.
And this is Jamie.
And as always, we always like to start each episode off by saying, make sure that you hit the like and the share button on any social media page that you see our programs that we put out. By doing that, it really helps us get higher up in the news feed, and it really helps us to be able to expand and spread our message out to a lot broader audience than what we're able to just on our own.
Absolutely.
And while you're doing that, also make sure you hit the subscribe button as well. That way you can continually see all of our messages and across any platform that we put out on. So you can stay up to date with what we have going on. You can tune in to hear Jamie's and I opinions on things going on and be able to make sure that you catch everything that we're going to be putting out, because
we're getting ready to expand and do a lot of other stuff.
Absolutely.
And, drop your email and
So by going to conservativestalk.org, make sure you hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner and the lower right-hand corner, and help us out with what you're able to, and really getting our and every sponsor, everything that comes our way really goes right back into the show and helps us to be able to produce more content, put it out in a lot broader fashion, and to be able to bring you a lot higher quality production as well. And while you're there, also go to and make sure you subscribe to our email list, where we're wanting to bring in a bi-weekly newsletter that we're going to be sending out here shortly. And it's going to be able to keep you more in touch about what's going on. It's going to be able to, you're going to be able to see us more. You're going to be able to really hear a lot more of what we have and what we're offering. It's also going to be able to make sure that you are kept up to date more on some very big things that we have that we're planning here in the future. And to be honest, in the not too far distant future. So we've got some pretty big things in motion, and we want to make sure that you are up to date with everything we have going forward with it, and that you're able to keep in touch with us as closely as possible.
Every time I think about what we're getting ready to do, I think about Kevin from The Office when he's like, I kept a secret, because this is like major. And
it is. And Jamie's busting at the seams to put it out
just
there.
to say something.
But yeah, it's going to be significant. But you ready for your favorite part?
Oh yeah.
All right.
Sweet.
So let's
108 days until we beat Stacey Abrams.
You know, we have done this 23 times now.
Yeah.
And every single time it has never gotten any older.
No, and I love it, especially when she continues to do awful, fraudulent things. I mean, like just recently, she brought in, we don't even know who this person is, but who says that they're law enforcement from another state, because she couldn't get any law enforcement officer to make a video or support her, period.
She had to import folks for her campaign ads.
For her campaign ad. Like, this is a person who is either retired or post-certified in another state or something else. She put them in the ad, and he talked about Brian Kemp like he ever worked for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I mean? Like we don't even know this guy's ever been law enforcement in the state of Georgia.
No.
Whatever. That's the person who the Democrats want you to vote for governor. A liar. Stacey Abrams.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into the first one. As it says, would somebody please...
I just came up with a great one.
Okay,
Stacey Abrams. Tides and lies. Because that's all they're doing, is collecting people's money and lying.
It's not a
Sorry.
bad. It's not a bad one. Not a bad one.
Stay safe from ties and lies.
Governor Kemp, if you like that one and you end up using it,
I'll text you.
we'll we accept sponsorships on our website, conservativestalk.org. Just go ahead. They'll ever know.
We need to trademark that.
We'll get the URL.
But grab us the money.
He's got the net out.
Yeah.
But back into our first topic. Would somebody please teach Democrats how to read? Because obviously they can't.
They can't. And okay, look, this is kind of off the cup. Show them the video.
Well, no, we're not doing that yet.
Look, this explains it all. Look,
but
okay,
it does.
so I get it. Justin wants to give you the background beforehand, but sometimes just images and words speak better than anything else, and this is awful. So we've
got to give you the context before
we
this.
got to even. I can't believe this man is a Georgian.
True.
So we'll back up.
But yes, all right. So Congressman from Georgia, Hank Johnson, has filed a piece of legislation that
Come on, Hank.
that says that he wants to term limit federal judges, specifically more or less the Supreme Court judges. And this goes back explicitly into what the actual Constitution says, as well as what the document supporting the understanding that we have explicitly within the Constitution.
Like you learned that in Civics 101 as to why the founding fathers wanted the people who upheld the law to not be term limited and be separate from the day-to-day process of the political of Congress and the political animal, pretty much.
Yes. And it's as you see on your screen there, it is explicitly stated in the Constitution. This is Article 3, Section 1, and it reads, the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges, both of the Supreme and the inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance of office. So essentially what that means, that the term good behavior, that's what it all stems from. That's where the lifetime appointments stem from.
Yeah. Look, so let's back up from like, because since he's going to go to this level of ignorance, then I'm gonna go here too. Okay. So first, I want to say this. And what right-minded person would ever think that this could be possible? And here's what I mean by that, right? It's the same argument that I've had with term limits for Congress or anybody else. We are trying to get people who benefit from there not being a rule against it to vote for a rule against it. So just at base, you want Congress to pass a law to put term limits on Congress, just like you want the Supreme Court justices to uphold a law that would limit themselves.
Well,
so that's the human side, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then even if you look at it just as the Constitution itself and the entire like purpose for the Supreme Court being designed the way that it is, it even goes against what they're supposed to be doing as judges.
Yeah, it's interesting because to what you were just saying there, if they did pass this law, it would require a federal judge or a Supreme Court justice to then file a lawsuit against the United States claiming that this law would be unconstitutional because they would be the only ones that would
be
standing.
Affected by it.
So you would have a federal judge suing the United States for term limiting them, or Congress trying to term limit them.
And then asking federal judges to rule in the favor of term limiting, putting limits on their terms.
Yes.
Okay.
It's
so just even when we take out the just like the facts of why this is wrong, there is like human nature. There is some like embedded instinct of self-preservation for someone who should just been like, I don't know if this is a good idea, because if they think like, why would I try to put something up that's going to have them do something to themselves?
No, I completely agree with that. But there again, this law is coming from a man who said this in a I believe it was an Armed Services Committee hearing. And just listen
Here's
to
the video.
this.
Yeah, my fear is that the whole island will become so overly populated that it will tip over and capsize.
Yeah, he
Tip
said that.
over.
We're going to capsize an island like a boat. I mean, that's painful just to listen to.
There are so many things. Like, come on, Hank. Like, come on, Hank.
Oh man, but you know, all of this stems from but all of this stems from the fact that they are so enraged about the recent rulings that have come down from the Supreme Court that they are willing to essentially take on unconstitutional laws, facially unconstitutional laws. I mean, they've done this already, but they're so enraged about some of these rulings that these justices have come back and said, look, there is nothing in the Constitution that says this. You are just completely dead wrong on any of these issues. Just drop it and move on.
Article 5.
Yes.
We just need to enact Article 5. Like after the video, the piece of legislation he filed, the fact that this fits the whole ideology of the left, the fact that they no longer understand the meaning of order or how order in systems are supposed to work. They're literally willing to go back to the rule of the jungle to fit some own political greed. Is like,
oh yeah, I mean that's
Article
exactly,
5.
I don't see how Article 5 plays into it, but you'll have to explain that one to me. How does Article 5?
Because once we can convene the Convention of States, and then hit the reset button.
No. You are essentially advocating for something that every conservative constitutionalist out there is dreadfully afraid of.
I'm afraid of it. I'm honestly afraid of it. Here's the thing, though. Like,
we got to get you in a re-education camp, man.
No, I probably need to put my tinfoil hat back on, because what's really going on is I am so concerned at the brainwashing that is going on from the left right now. Mm-hmm. Like, they are literally trying to destroy order.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, specifically, we'll talk about a couple of the things that they have done that, quite frankly, unconstitutional on its face.
Yeah.
And this is the reasons why they are pushing for this issue so hard. And
here's my thing, okay? And here's why I just, hit the red button, right, with Article 5, because I'm really not advocating for it. What I'm truly advocating for is that we have to put a stop to this. Like, yes. like we have to actually stop worrying about ourselves a little bit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, as Republicans, we get in this mantra where we're like so focused on, business, family, and everything else, that we allow this to happen when we should have stopped it a little bit earlier. And I think we're reaching a critical point to where this is it. Like, you know what I mean? Like they have already got the generation up under us. We have, it's almost like part of this Gen Z era, they're in silence. They're like meeting and going to churches in a larger wave than my generation is, the millennials, my section of millennials is going, but they're quiet about it because they're scared of their peers. Like, we have
wrong about that.
It's almost like, the horror stories where they're talking about when you had to go to church underground because you were scared of how people would view you.
Yeah.
Like, we got, like, either we hit the reset button or we have to stand up fully, like no backing down, no second guessing it. And I'm guilty of it myself. You know what I mean? Because I just want peace,
Mhm.
But this is the time where that doesn't happen anymore. Not for this.
Well, so what this is all stemming for, and what I think this is heading towards, is an effort to essentially pack the court. Because if this piece of legislation fails on its face, and I think Hank Johnson's plan
Is for it to
is to
fail on its face.
then come back and say, well, if they're not willing to only serve a certain limit of time, then we need to make sure that we have more thoughts, more opinions, more interpretations on the court. That way it has a fairer and a more diverse view as opposed to having actual constitutionalists on the court. I think that's where this is ultimately heading to. And I, that's coming out of some of the cases that have been brought up, and those are the New York case involving the Second Amendment, where they essentially said that there is no, like, per the Constitution, every state needs to be at a minimum shall issue when it comes to concealed carry license, because it's what it was fundamentally written for.
Correct.
And then you have the ultimately the abortion issue. They're wanting to come up with these interpretations of, or just these interpretations where they find rights as opposed to rights that are actually listed in the Constitution.
Which is and they're trying to combine human rights, not necessarily human rights. That's a weird way of phrasing it. I guess you could say, like, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put it. Here's what I'm thinking, right? There are certain things that are outlined inside of the Constitution, and that's what they're supposed to be. That's what they're supposed to rule on. All right. Is it really here or is it not? Can it be interpreted that way based upon what the founding of this country was put for? Or is this something that you like to do that your generation has normalized?
It's called judicial activism.
There we go.
Yes.
To where you're trying to have the law be interpreted as a way of your own
that fits your
avocations.
ideologies.
There you go.
Yes. Well, and we also have other things that are outside just the outside of, quite frankly, just what the Supreme Court said, because this wasn't actually an official opinion. It was, well, it was an official opinion, but it wasn't brought up in a manner to where, you had the full hearings and you had the months long wait while the justices did the research and interpretations. But talking about Biden's eviction moratorium,
Yeah.
Justice Kavanaugh came out and said, look, this would have to be an act of Congress in order to enact this sort of deal. Okay, we let you get away with the first one, but expanding it and moving it further down the line, not going to happen, just simply because there's no way that you can do that outside the legislative process.
And outside of a state of emergency, right? Like the pandemic is really what caused it.
Well, I mean, technically under the executive order, we were still under a state of emergency.
Well, okay. I see the legal argument there.
Mm,
All right. But here's my thing. The moment that everyone was able to go back to work free and encompassed was the moment that, like, realistically that should have been out the door.
well, let's be completely honest. Yes, COVID happened. It was a real virus. China created it, released it into the world, and we were affected by it, but it wasn't to the point to where they said it was. There should have been no encumbrance of going to work anyway.
So in the early days, right, I don't feel that we should have been able to not go to work, right? Density always scares me when we start talking about viral diseases, because it, to a certain degree, it's easy for us to say that, right? It's easy for even people in Atlanta to say that because, like, we're not packed 84 units on an acre, whereas, or, 3/10 of an acre, whereas like New York City, they're like sardines in a can. So they're going to spread faster through any infection, doesn't matter what it is. All right. I see.
But the thing about it is this disease was,
it was engineered.
Well, not that.
And it had a low rate.
Yes. I mean, they were claiming folks that had COVID but were shot in the head as dying from COVID.
Yeah. That because it became
They essentially manufactured the numbers and skewed the numbers and the way that everything or the reporting of it.
Correct. The fear alone. So let me put it this way, okay? For the month of March in 2020, those 30 days, I believe that it's okay that we were shut down.
I wholeheartedly disagree.
And here's why: is because it's unknown. Okay, the moment that it came out that we had data that showed that this is a consistent low rate is the moment that everything else should have gone back to normal. It was only because we didn't know what it was. Okay,
Even then, you don't hit the stop button for something that you don't know. You need to have the proof behind that before you hit the stop button.
You can't have the proof until the data's done.
So you hit the stop button on the entire country until you gather the proof, but you can't actually gather the proof because you've stopped everything and sent everybody home.
The thing is there's a discretionary level of caution that just needs to be mindful. You know what I mean? Like, you got to have a certain level of caution. 30 days is a fine level of caution.
30 days.
14.
30 days could have. No, I mean, the damage and the toll that it took on our economic infrastructure was horrible.
No, how it extended was horrible.
Well, it exacerbated the situation, but those 30 days in of itself were, I mean, just the harm that it did just in that by shutting everything down without us actually knowing anything that much about it, it really ramped up that fear.
I get that, right? It ramped up the fear, and when you really start thinking about small businesses, the majority of businesses, small business, that is damaging, right? I recant that portion. But I still believe that I am not a mass person by any means, but there's like, wash your hands, you know what I mean? Use hand sanitizer. Yeah. There's a level of caution that I felt was justified. The way they took it, though, and the way that they expanded off of that to use for political gain is what I have a problem with.
So you're a proponent of mask mandates? Is that what you're saying?
That's literally what I just said. I'm not a proponent of.
Okay, I just wanted to.
But literally what I said. I'm not a proponent of.
We were really going to start opening up applications.
There was literally there has to be a level of caution though.
Well, you know, I mean, but the same level of caution that you're talking about is the same level of cautions that we take when involving with any flu strain.
Correct.
So we haven't shut down the entire country based upon any flu strain either.
Not since the Spanish flu.
Well, that
which created where we are now. They're all variations. I mean, over the last 100 years, even if you go back to like Corona was already around.
But they didn't have the treatment possibilities. They didn't have the medication. They didn't have any of that stuff back then that we do now.
Which is also true, right? Which is why I believe that, you know, the month of March, trust me, look, I had to be locked in my office for almost, 30 days, eating lunch across from people because we weren't allowed to leave the office when we came in.
But you're allowed to congregate inside of a small room to eat lunch across
6
the table
feet
from
apart.
each other.
Only enter after the first person has been given their individual plate, right? It was hell.
See, I was a big proponent of the national immunity deal. I went around licking doorknobs until I caught it. And I've just got it out of the way.
I'm a firm believer in herd immunity. Okay. I believe that herd immunity has to be a full third or more of the population in order to get over any sickness.
So what you're saying is we should have all been out licking doorknobs until we just got out of the way.
A third of us, yes.
So
a third gets the shot, a third licks doorknobs, a third
gets the shot.
Third does whatever. That's how herd immunity works.
The shot. Well, that's also another thing that they were talking about.
We'll get to this later because
so part of that goes into a little bit of that.
Okay.
So Biden put out his executive order mandating that several businesses, in order for you to work in these environments, you have to be vaccinated. Which the Supreme Court came back and said,
I don't agree with that.
I don't think so, buddy.
I don't agree with that at all. Here's the thing.
Again, another massive federal overstep.
Big time. You cannot force someone to put something in their body.
No.
All you can do is offer it and say, here you go. Here's your choices. Because this is new and it won't be covered on your insurance plan, and we kind of just had to make this up in 30 days, you're taking this at your own risk. Just want to make sure that you understand that.
If you grow a tail, it doesn't. Your health care plan doesn't
But
cover
I mean,
it to
like,
have it removed.
we're in a major opioid crisis. I mean, it's the same thing.
But so another one that they just had a major ruling with, of course, and this kind of gives a segue into our next little topic that we were talking about, was what happened with the ruling that came out with the EPA.
Yeah.
That was a massive kind of, we'll call it this way. It was the congressional branch, the legislative branch, coming out and giving an agency more or such a broad authority that the Supreme Court had to come back and say, hey, wait, you cannot do this simply because you don't have the legislative or you don't have the ability to do that without telling them specifically what they can and cannot do. You cannot give out such a broad authority, which jumps right into our next agreement. So talking about what the EPA ruling is so essentially what it is it comes up in what's known as the major question doctrine. So what that is that it says that Congress must give specific or explicit instructions on anything that allows a regulatory agency, the EPA, the ATF, the IRS, all the alphabet agencies in the executive branch, when they give them authority, it cannot be such a broad authority that this rule organization can then come back in and say, okay, well, we're just doing this over here and y'all can't say anything, can't do anything about it. The American public can't because it's not an election year and there's nothing that you're going to be able to do about it anyway. That also applies with anything of any major political significance as well.
So,
well, economic and political.
Yeah, because here's the thing, right? And when we start talking about EPA and EPD on the state level, you really start messing with construction and development. So for the longest time, right, housing, development, construction on the commercial end, especially because of the large amount of taxes that corporations pay, is a cornerstone in our economy. So what has started to happen is the EPA was coming out, and since they couldn't pass legislation at the time for the Green New Deal, this administration was basically having the EPA just kind of do it.
Mm-hmm. It was passed in the Obama administration. It was essentially suspended under the Trump administration. And then once the Biden administration, so the lawsuit originally was filed under the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm.
When the Trump administration came in and more or less just pushed it off and kind of said, no, we're not doing anything along that lines. Then under the Obama administration, and to the credit for this ruling, all the companies that would have been affected by this had already started to implement it on their own anyway, because they saw that this law had passed. They saw the law had passed, and they just thought that it was going to come down anyway. So let's just go ahead and get ahead of the curve and start doing it anyway. Well, turns out that they really didn't have to, just simply because of the fact that it was written in such a broad stroke that, and by broad stroke I mean that it had been written in a way that allowed the EPA to have kind of a very wide discretion in what they could do. It didn't say there was no real congressional or legislative barriers that were put there. I mean, they could expand well beyond what the legislative intent at that time could have been. And there wouldn't have been anything that essentially Congress could do without coming back and passing a brand new law saying, no, you can't do this.
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court took up the case and they came back and they said, look, if you're Congress, if you're going to pass laws like this, you have to define exactly where their lane is, as opposed to just allowing them to run rampant through the streets.
Yep.
So that takes us into what we're talking about with the federal gun grabbers. And so essentially what it is under the NFA, the National Firearms Act, it makes the ATF a regulatory agency that essentially says that they can come up and they go through the quote unquote rule making regulation making process where they post it. But they post the proposed changes online. They take a comment or a time period of comments, and then they decide whether or not they're going to implement this based upon the comments they received. But quite frankly, they're going to they implement it anyway, regardless of that. If they're going to make the changes, they're going to implement it.
Yeah.
But the way it is written, it allows a non-legislative body, a body that cannot be voted on, a body that is wholly appointed and hired, not voted on, to come in and make regulations and laws involving one of our actual enumerated rights, and that being the Second Amendment. So you have an organization that has no accountability to the people whatsoever coming in and making laws that directly affect the people, and there's nothing that the people can do about it.
Yeah, which is I'm gonna tie these two together, which is why the EPA thing was such a big deal, because when you start looking at the additional environmental savings that are supposed to be done, is what they're calling them, making sure that if you're in a certain area, you have to have solar panels, you have to have, rain catchers, all this other kind of stuff. That was not necessarily explicit in a law per se.
Well, this
right?
was
Well, hear me
the
out.
carbon reduction and limitations
I
of it.
I understand. What I'm the main reason I'm bringing that up is that adds to development, which is transferred down to the consumer who purchases a house. So when you're looking at that transfer cost of like 50 to 100,000, now you're starting to see how these environmental impacts are now affecting our housing market, and why people aren't going to be able to afford to purchase a house, and the dominoes start to fall. You see the same thing that they're trying to do with gun grabs, because they know that they can't pass certain legislation.
Yes.
So then they go to the ATF, they go to all these other agencies, and they say, hey, implement this practice. Because if you implement this practice across the board at the federal level, then all of your local state jurisdictions then pass down that law, and then you essentially do the same thing, which is why the ruling is so important on what they did with the EPA, is because now we can transfer that across all bureaucracy.
That's the idea, and specifically the idea behind what Arizona is doing. So Arizona has filed a lawsuit in federal court, and they've been joined by 16 other states and 2 private organizations. So what it's ultimately going to do is it's challenging the ATF on this ability. And what they're saying is that because Congress did not have the ability to pass legislation that would limit access to certain, we'll call them hunks of metal, because that's technically that's what they are, because they're not actual firearms under the
because they're still
definition
raw
of it.
material.
Yes, you had a regulatory agency coming in and changing the definition, kind of like what the Biden administration is doing with recession.
Title IX. Oh, yeah, I'm going to get into that.
And Title IX.
And Title IX, trying to change the definition of a woman.
But you have them coming in and making these regulatory changes on an actual constitutionally enumerated right, which is beyond my mind. I don't see how they even thought that this would be legal and allowable, just simply because it says explicitly in the Constitution. Well, I guess it does say Congress, or Congress shall not, or the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, and specifically more or less talking about Congress there. But Congress passed the NFA, which effectively where they're deriving this ability and this rulemaking process from. But it's so what they're trying to do is that Arizona and these 16 other states are filing this lawsuit to overturn or rule this quote unquote ghost gun ban null and void, because they're saying that the NFA was written too broadly in this aspect, and the ATF shouldn't have this regulatory power that they do, or that they are saying that they have.
That they should have explicit duties given to them.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like states have rights. I'm definitely going to butcher this, but there's certain things that the FBI does that the CIA doesn't do, and vice versa, because their agencies are different.
Yes,
Even though
FBI works continental. CIA is not allowed to work within the United States. They have to work outside the United States.
which is I knew what I was going to butcher.
Well, I mean, you were right.
yeah, but you know what I mean. But that's the same thing, right?
Mhm.
Because when we go back to it, they're still they gave them actual powers. They align their powers through Congress when they created them, and they go to pass laws that give them either more or change the powers that they have. Right?
Mhm.
We just can't give a blanket statement based on political affiliation, pretty much, because then you're going to have bureaucracies moving with the wind based upon, and then that's only at the top too, because then you're still going to have the people that they hire that come in that are going to instill that lower ideology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like what you said there that with the kind of the swinging or shifting of the wind with that, just simply because of the fact that there is, as we see the pendulum swing back and forth with our elected officials, the bureaucracies that are instilled there, they don't swing back and forth because they are
Only at the top.
hired. Yes. And those that are instilled at the top are not willing to change. Essentially, they're not willing to go back and remove prior administration's rules and regulations to a certain degree because they're concerned about the retaliatory effect
Well, here's the other
in
problem
that
too.
regard.
Here's the other problem too,
Mhm.
right? In bureaucracy, it's hard to fire someone. You can essentially reduce their duties to a certain degree, right? They still do their work, but the level of basically what you're trying to do, you would give that work to someone else of like mind, right? But there's a certain level of work that still has to be there. Otherwise, they can show a grievance and then they sue the government.
So
You see what I'm
essentially,
saying?
what you're saying is we need to make the federal government more like what we have
For private business
for
when it comes to
Georgia:
yes, yes,
right to hire, right to fire.
yes, because that's not an option in government. You know what I mean? Like in private business, you really don't have to have a reason. Like
Mhm.
you try to enumerate reasons so that you have a defense in the future for why you fired that person if they choose to sue you.
Well, in Georgia, it really wouldn't matter. You can be sued. I mean, you'd be fired anytime.
Correct. But it didn't work like that at government.
Well, maybe that's something that
So you got to
the
play the
new
game.
Congress coming in can change.
See what I'm saying?
Because
Because right now in bureaucracy, you got to play the
Mhm.
game. You got to say, okay, well, you may be a Republican appointee, knowing that you may only have 4 years at the head of this agency, but who your number two was hired and fired. So your number two, if that's their pay grade, you may actually have to lean on your number three in order to get what you get done because your number two may be undermining you. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, it's an awful business.
But so some of the other things that are named in this lawsuit specifically is about how the ATF is trying to force private businesses to conform to their new ruling and that they have to maintain these records that are essentially their firearm selling records almost indefinitely, up to 20 years, I believe.
Damn, you know what you just correlated for me in my head?
Well, they're making a list
Not just
and they're going to check it twice.
like a ESG list
Absolutely.
that they'll have them give their environmental impact score, and then they now are trying to place on an agency for firearms, a regulatory body that does the same thing.
hmm Yeah, they are essentially saying that you have to maintain these records. They're trying to make it to where they are transferred electronically as opposed to actual hard copies. Because right now you're not required to have the electronic copies. You're only required to maintain the hard copies. Once you have the electronic copies, they're
They're
going to
there
try to
for
come back and say
definite.
you have to upload it into this database, and that's where you get the list. Because another thing that they're doing with this is they're also wanting to essentially have every single part, every single piece that goes into a firearm serialized so they can track and trace every single thing. And you have to have a background check for every single part of it.
Yep. So then even if you switch up pieces, then they'll come to every single person to figure out how that gun got pieced together.
They'll know everything about where it came from, where it went, how it got there, everything.
Wow, you know what you just hit me with too? And then they'll put it on a blockchain. Because that's essentially the whole purpose of a blockchain. Is once you take a data bit of information, that's your block, and then that's where your ledger is stored of whatever information it is. So through a blockchain, right? When we talk about in crypto, right? The reason why crypto started going big for banks is because you could sell a fraction of a Bitcoin, right, to 30 other people, and I gave you the original one. If something happens to person F, they can bring that line of chain all the way back to me to see if there's anything between me and person F, even though there's so many people in between it. Right? That's how you get that's how you get high level RICO and all these other different types of cases that can be built in the future, right? Because now there's so much cash that's just missing, but they know to a certain degree what's being done with it. So that's the whole purpose of a blockchain, which is why they're trying to separate cryptocurrencies from the blockchain technology, because then you can put everything with a serial number or identification number on a blockchain.
So, you know, one of those rabbit holes that we were talking about, you know, how they were talking about how at some point in time we were going to have barcodes tattooed on us, and that's how we would do any sort of commerce. Well, okay, you have that, but then get rid of all money and move it specifically over to the blockchain technology with that, and
oh yeah,
can
Dude,
ultimately track and trace everything.
There's some things that, so I have a hard life in my head sometimes, right? Because like I am a bureaucrat by trade, okay, but I am also a conspiracy theorist, which is ironic because there's a lot of people who are like that who work in government, because you're just like, hey, I didn't got here and realize like I can work to help stop.
That's why I got out of government.
Right. I can help work stop from the inside and do my part here, you know, to make sure that it's fair and concise. But there are some people who do not think that way. And I'm not going to name the city, okay? But there is a city in the South, major city, that decided to use blockchain technology to keep track of homeless people. So one thing that they realized was that even for free aid or anything of that nature, you still have to have your social security number. Well, a lot of people who are homeless don't have any of that identification number, anything that identifies them anymore. They'll be lucky if they have a birth certificate or social security number. So this one major city started to round up all of their homeless people and started to compile with their, you know, State Department of Health and everywhere else, all of their records into a blockchain, so that these people, and then tied them to what I refer to as a Obama phone number. So then these people can keep their cell phone number that they pay literally almost nothing or for free. And as long as they can type in their number, they'll get a 2-factor code. They'll get their text message. They'll open it up. They'll verify that that's the number that they have listed. And then they can identify this person and show all of their medical history, their social security number, everything else, which is terrifying, because then at that moment you're completely, there's no more off the grid. There's no more hiding from Big Brother, any of that. And now the second part of that is when you start doing it with ammunition and everything else, I can track every single thing about a person.
See,
because then I just tie the blockchains together.
It just terrified me. They start serializing bullets. Not the casing that the bullets come in, but the actual bullets, the projectile that leaves the firearm. Because the casings you can take and reload anyway. Well, I guess you could text, or you could serialize those.
You can still do it too, but then but then at that point, right, they find the casing, they chase the casing back to you because it's in your blockchain. Or if you still are using the manufactured bullet and hadn't, you know, refilled it or had it refilled. See, if you go somewhere and have it refilled, they're probably going to make it to where they have to add it in with a new number that goes to your system. If you refill it, then they're going to say you're the last person with this casing.
So that is exactly what the new ATF ruling says that has to be done in regard to the quote unquote ghost guns. Simply because if you take a firearm that is unserialized into um, a gunsmith shop, or if you're trying to sell it, before you can sell it or before a gunsmith can transfer that firearm back to you after they've done their work on it, it has to be serialized. So it's essentially, and then it has to be re-registered, and then it has to go back on to, has to go into the books, and then it becomes traceable and is no longer technically a ghost gun.
People wonder why I'm so scared of Democrats as part of it. Is because like I understand the technology, and there's a way for technology like that to thrive and not be so intrusive. Okay. But when you have the ideology that says big government is good, we just need to know everything about you so we can serve you better, and they're the ones who are leading the forefront on it, that takes all of any form of privacy, security, everything out of it. So
as we mentioned before, you have no right to privacy anyway.
You have no right to privacy, right? But here's the thing: I would trust a Republican to try to protect it more than I would a Democrat.
Fair point. So that kind of leads into the next topic that we were discussing with this, and this is that Democrats have yet again are targeting private businesses. So what this is stemming from is there was a hearing that was just held. It was called the Examining the Practices and Profits of Gun Manufacturers. They had invited several major manufacturers to testify before the House Oversight Committee involving, or as long as these manufacturers produced what they call these assault weapons or assault rifles. They as long as this manufacturer produced an AR-15 and were a national producer of it. Well, they had sent out several invitations. You had Daniel Defense there. You had Strom and Ruger and Company there. They had requested that Smith and Wesson CEO attend as well because they're one of the larger manufacturers and distributors. But he had ultimately said yes. But as it became more and more apparent that this was going to be nothing more than just a partisan, just a
witch hunt,
a hit job, essentially, the CEO of the CEO of
Smith and
Wesson came back and said, sorry, can't do this, which was it was exactly what he needed to do. Now they're talking about issuing a subpoena, or the chairman, Maloney, is trying to issue a subpoena to require him to come in and testify before Congress, which, quite frankly, is, again, another massive overreach, because why is the oversight body of Congress, which was set up and organized as a means to oversee government practices and reform, not private practices and reform. Why are we bringing in private businesses?
They're doing this across the board to fit their agenda. Something similar that was related to that committee hearing happened a couple days ago in the Judicial Committee hearing, to where they were just they had Homeland Security representatives come in and testify, and it got to having a conversation about AR-15s, and basically they just used it as a hit job on Republicans. One member of the committee pretty much spent her entire 5 minutes asking how come the majority of her colleagues on the right weren't going to stand with her in trying to remove these AR-15s. That wasn't even the question that was being asked to the deputy secretary. It was just a ploy to get it out, and it had nothing to do with the hearing itself. That's just what they're doing.
I mean, that was that's because of the piece of legislation that they have, that they're trying to force on Americans right now, and that is the new or the latest gun grabbing piece of legislation, the assault weapons ban that we touched on in the last episode. That They're banning these quote unquote assault weapons and these weapons of war, which is their favorite term that they use. But yet, in the explicit or in the examples of firearms that would be exempt from this piece of legislation, there are actual weapons that are used in actual war. Actually, so one of the weapons was the weapon that essentially beat the Nazis.
Yeah,
Go figure. But yet, that one's okay.
not banned.
You know, it was one of the most deadly conflicts in the history of mankind, and this weapon led the forefront on it. But
Either
it's
I'm
not
having deja
banned.
vu, or we had this conversation
We did
on
last week. Mhm.
last week. Yeah, so like I feel the same way about like someone owns that gun that's in Congress and they got it stricken from the bill, which is another one of those pork barrel thing. Like it's not pork barrel spending, but it's still part of the roasting of the pig.
They
Right.
carve out exceptions that don't apply to that don't apply to them.
Yep.
I got what you're
And we
saying
see
there.
it all the time,
Mhm.
which is another thing that kind of came out this week. And when we put the run of show together, none of this had ever happened. But like, it goes back to you had one whole Muchin, whatever his name is, I always butcher it. In the Senate, Manchin holds out on Build Back Better and has been the stronghold for it. But now all of a sudden they see President Biden's like descending numbers, almost in like the single digits and in the teens, almost in the teens, headed towards single digits in approval and like approval ratings. All of a sudden they change the name on it. He has a private meeting to get something that he wants. And then now you have the Green New Deal under its third name that's getting ready to leave the Senate.
Mm-hmm. Well, right now they only have 49. Cinema has not weighed in on it. They have so Cinema has a very hard line that she's taking on a specific portion that was included within that piece of legislation, and that being the increase in the taxing. I believe it
On
was
corporations.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, Manchin said that he wanted that in there. Cinema said that that cannot be a part of anything that she's going to support. So there may be hope, but we won't know. So Congress
My fear
Congress
is
leaves today, or the House leaves today, and they go on recess. The Senate still has another week.
my fear is this, okay, is that clearly we are not dealing with people who will not make a deal for their own interest.
Oh yeah, absolutely, of course.
You know what I mean? That always terrifies me when we start talking about legislation because people forget how bills used to be passed when and everybody's like, how did you read 1,000-piece legislation in the middle of the night? Most people didn't. What most people did was they made sure that what they asked for was in there, and then it got passed because that was the only thing they cared about. And that was the Democratic model all the way after Reconstruction in the South, all the way through. That's like,
now, when you say Democrat model, it's small d Democrat model, the Democratic model, because that's done on both sides of the aisle.
I know, but what I'm talking about is when look at every major piece of big government expansion has come under them. So when we start talking about how they're going to take over private businesses, implement a new credit score for private businesses, force taxes to go up for, corporate citizens, like it fits their model.
Yes, no,
all the way
you're
back to
absolutely
the 30s and FDR.
and it's although he will not say that this is what happened, it was very fishy looking. We'll call it that. Manchin agreeing to do this new quote unquote Green Deal light, or this Build Back Better light, after they had already passed the chip bill, or the China Competitive Act. Essentially, they because the Republicans in the Senate said that they would not, under any circumstances, support that piece of legislation if talks were still ongoing about this Build Back Better Light. However, when they passed the CHIPS bill, within 24 hours,
They changed the name and then went ahead and passed it.
well, they hadn't
They
passed it.
hadn't passed it yet.
Yes, they changed it, and then they picked up one extra voter.
Yeah.
So little underhanded, but
and to tie it back, right? All of that goes back to, once again, they are incrementally trying to creep back into small business, right? Because until you control all of corporations as well as have a large government, socialism doesn't work.
Well, I mean,
because you have to have the aristocrats as well.
Well, that CHIPS bill is specifically targeted at big corporations. Those things are not. None of that money is going to be going to any small. They claim that it is going to help research people and startups to be able to have funding and all this. No, all of that money is going to go to the big guys, and we all know it. And all of that, $52 billion is going to be parsed out to those three major chip manufacturers.
Yep. They'll up production. They'll give, they'll bring in more robots. Most of that's in my robots anyway now, in order to manufacture a chip.
Well, they keep talking about this $15 wage. This was a first for me. I walked into a McDonald's probably 2 months ago or so, and I placed an order on the little panel there in the screen instead of going to somebody to take my order. I had placed my order on a screen. I mean, you have Chipotle that is doing you have to order on the app before you can order at all, because they don't take orders in the drive-through or in the lines. You have to order on the app. Well, I mean, frankly, if you read the terms and conditions on those, to download those apps, by you agreeing to be able to do that, they can track all of your information on that. So they are essentially being able to track they mine your metadata, and they can turn around and sell it, make more money on your data that you agreed to share with them to be able to use that app.
Because then they give it to somebody else who's already in a partner with them, right? Like
advertising firms to target advertising.
Yeah, and before we go too far down this rabbit hole, come back up. Like, that was one thing that I don't know if I can even say their name, but a big supermarket department store that everyone knows that has the symbol of a bullseye got hit with because they had mined and bought so much metadata on people that they started sending people pregnancy tests. They actually sent a young individual pregnancy coupons for baby things, birth control, like all the stuff that this place can produce, right? And she hadn't told her parents yet, and the dad saw it in the mail and was like, "What is this? Why do you keep sending this?" And then she eventually told her parents. Wow. And that's how she had to tell her parents, right? All because of target advertising that came from someone buying and selling large metadata.
Wow. So coming back up for air on that one.
Yeah, scary.
Well, yes. But what they're trying to do, or what this entire hearing was all about, that this whole exploring the practices and profits of gun manufacturers, is they were trying to say that these manufacturers are 100% liable for every single, the manufacturer is 100% liable for every round that leaves that barrel. They were trying to say that they were responsible for all of the horrendous acts that have happened in New York, Florida, Uvalde, all of these places.
So when we go to war and those rounds are fired, are they saying that they're liable?
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Because then at that point,
that makes you think.
Then the federal government's liable because they sent them over there to fire those rounds.
And they were the contract that they were the managing. They were the ones that
managed
paid the contracts out and issued the contracts. Yeah,
yep.
That'd be a good question, especially if it hits a civilian.
Because here's the other thing too, if you go to war, right, and you're in the military for the time of your contract, you are government property.
Essentially, yes.
So then at that point, when you fire that round, if something were to happen, right? So let's first look at the negative.
Or you drop a smart bomb on a car full of children that you thought were terrorists.
Yep. And they sue you. Are you then liable because you gave that person that gun? And then at that point, are you trying to say that the manufacturer is liable? But then you made the purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Because usually it doesn't matter. Like if I buy a vehicle, right? Ford's not liable if I get into a wreck.
No. But yet their entire argument was that, or during this hearing, was that they were the only industry in the entire American economic sphere that enjoyed protections like that.
No.
I mean, was the World Trade Center bomber or the Oklahoma abortion or Timothy McVeigh, the bomber, was the manufacturer of those vans that were used? Were they liable for those?
So here's like, and we talk about this all the time. Like anybody can get sued. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So like when someone got punched in the face on Sprint Airlines, was Sprint liable for that?
It's a good question.
Because that's the case that they're trying to build against gun manufacturers. If I get into a wreck, is Ford liable?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's essentially the same thing. I purchased it from a Ford dealership. When I go out, if something were to happen, does Ford have to pay for my car and those medical bills?
I'm pretty sure that's the reason why you buy insurance, that you are liable for that
and required to
assume
purchase
the responsibility.
So is this also a ploy for them to increase?
No, I wouldn't go down that rabbit hole. I doubt that. I would say it's more of the effort that they are undertaking to essentially bankrupt the gun manufacturing industry.
But here's the whole thing too. That's why you buy business insurance.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to note,
because I just want to add this real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Though these things happen more frequently than we would like, as far as mass shootings, they are still low in comparing to the number of guns sold.
Oh gosh, yes.
So when you look at that,
it's 16 million AR-15 style rifles that have been sold since the last ban was lifted, and there in the past 20 years there have been less than 2,500 people killed with an AR or an AR-15 style rifle, which, in all honesty, and going into this deal, on September 11th, there were more people killed in a single day by airplanes than there have been by AR-15 style rifles in the past 20 years. Are they going to haul Boeing in and ask if they feel like they should be liable for that?
Same thing with the Boeing crashes that happen. Is Boeing liable for, you know what I mean? Like,
well, they ultimately said that there was a manufacturing flaw.
There's a manufacturing flaw, right?
But there's nothing in that sense.
You know what I mean? But like, are they? That's a different pathway. But at the same time, when you think about just everything else, you know what I mean? Like if that was my business, I'd just beef up my insurance policy because like it's no different than when you look at celebrities, right? Like celebrities get these out.
Well, at some point in time, you become insurable.
Depending. Because to a certain point, you become uninsurable, right? But think about it. You have celebrities who have, or hand models who have $2 million policies on just their right or left hand. So to a certain degree, you can.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's hard to think about it that way because it's a business.
But yes, but it's interesting to note that one of the major terms or the terms that they continually used over and over and over and over and over in this hearing was the term weapons of war. Looking back at it and going back to the example that I just made earlier about 9/11, what happened on there, those two aircraft. The two aircraft that were used in all four crashes were 757s and 767s,
which are used in war.
Yes, both the 757 and the
Huh.
767 are both aircrafts that have been purchased and are in current use within our militaries right now. They are, by the very definition of that, weapons of war.
What is Air Force One and Air Force Two?
So Air Force Two is a seven, I believe it's a 767. I'm not sure what Air Force One is, but I know Air Force Two is one of those two. I believe it. If it's not, it's either the 757 or 767. It may be the 767.
Wow.
But yes, Air Force Two is one of those two planes. And
So if Air Force One
so, all right, so it's 757 is Air Force Two. 767
is Air
is
Force.
used as a refueling plane. Essentially, it's hollowed out. All the seats and everything are removed. It is then crammed full with a container that can contain jet fuel, and it's used to refuel
While they're still
Air
in the air.
Force One, Air Force Two, any sort of long distance bomber, anything of that midair refueling. That's what that is used for. So again, weapons of war.
So if it damages a runway, Air Force Two comes in, hits the runway, damages the runway, is Boeing liable?
Again, good question.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like because now I have because now that they're just making stuff up,
Mhm.
man. They're just making whatever they can up to go after gun manufacturers. And like this is, I mean, if it was a civil case, this would be like
Well,
discrimination
that is essentially what they're
well, I
trying
mean,
to establish
as a
for.
natural person civil
Mhm.
case, you know, because like as the natural person, if they sue them civilly, you know, like the federal government, I'm just trying to figure out how the best way to say it is. Like you could use this as discrimination against gun manufacturers if you were to look at it in the same context of we would in a hate crime or anything else.
Well, so California passed a piece of legislation. They claimed in response to the piece of legislation that was passed in Texas so the piece in Texas was filed that says that any citizen can file a lawsuit against a medical provider if they're providing abortions. Well, Governor Newsom came back and essentially the day after it was filed said, I want this piece of legislation drafted up. Well, it was just recently passed where any citizen can then come back and sue a gun manufacturer if the firearm that they produce was used in a shooting.
In the state of California.
Yes, because that would extend past the jurisdiction.
So if they're not headquartered in California, if the
No, they can.
okay,
Because that's essentially what's known as a nexus. Because if you it has to be it so for instance, if it is legally sold in uh in California, then any company across the entire United States can be sued. If it's illegally sold, cannot do that because it wasn't supposed to be in the first place.
but correct me if I'm wrong, right? If I am not headquartered there, okay, my company is out of Delaware,
Mm-hmm.
but my headquarters may be in Texas. The gun was sold through a third party in California. A crime was committed. Wouldn't the state of California have to go file something in Delaware?
No.
They could file it against me in
Yes.
California,
Mm-hmm.
and then I have to go to California
Yes.
and not Delaware to fight the
Yes.
lawsuit.
Because it establishes essentially what is known as a nexus because you are doing business
But see, that's what I'm
through a
saying.
chain. You are
Through a
essentially
chain.
you are doing business with somebody that you know or that you should reasonably know is selling inside these other states.
Interesting.
Especially if you are,
'Cause
for
I know
instance, so like gun stores around here, especially one here in Rome, Country Sportsman is a licensed dealer for Glock, for other gun manufacturers.
yeah.
So they are getting their stuff directly from that manufacturer. They're not having to go to a dealer, pick out the dealer, and go
Got
through a
you.
distributor. They're getting
Because
it
then you got to
directly
go
from
to
the
the.
manufacturer.
Got you. Okay. Because then, okay. I understand. That's
But yes,
interesting.
so it's also interesting to note, and this doesn't really tie into the whole committee hearing type deal, but it is something that I found very. It made me very irate. I guess is a good way of saying it. Just this week, you had you had Biden. I almost said Biden, but you had Biden come in.
Same thing.
Yeah, well,
Same energy.
probably a little bit worse. But you had Biden come in and deliver a remote speech to the Noble Conference, which is the I forgot what it was, the National Order of Black Law Enforcement Members.
Yeah.
So
that was...
yeah, and they were saying, so the crux of his speech was that Republicans, because they are not supporting this assault weapons ban, are essentially saying that they don't care about law enforcement members, that they would rather see them go out and get shot and die because they refuse to support them.
And now I have hella questions, okay? Because now merging the two, right? So now Biden says that law enforcement can carry assault weapons, but Republicans don't support the law enforcement carrying the assault weapons, even though if they get shot, the manufacturer of the assault weapon that the law enforcement is carrying can get sued along with the officer. You see what I'm saying?
You just really kind of that was a lot of twists and turns on that one. I'm trying to. I
So
see the roadmap you're building with. I see that.
because they're still using assault weapons, right?
Well, technically, no, never mind. But yes, go ahead.
Well, you're right. They're not.
No, they are. Well, they're not. Just simply because assault weapons are termed are actually identified as weapons that would be used for continuous suppressive fire in order to move an assault forward to keep your enemy's heads down, as opposed to just a single shot every now and then. It's meant for a very suppressive wall of fire, so that nobody's peering up over for instance, a bunker and watching you move and shooting at you while doing this, because you have a continuous rate of fire at
automatic
them.
versus semi-automatic.
Exactly. That's the difference between assault. That is what is the difference between a modern sporting rifle and an assault weapon.
Yeah, because a full automatic, I need to make sure that I can either keep pressing forward or get the hell out.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a semi is I'm trying to aim.
Exactly. You're out having fun.
Yep. I'm aiming.
Mm-hmm.
I'm target practice.
Yep.
So I just don't know. The contradictories are what are really getting me. So on one side, they're saying, we want to be able to sue the manufacturer so that if they go in there, but then they kill someone who's committing a crime, and now the person who committed the crime's family can sue the law enforcement and the gun manufacturer, because the gun manufacturer.
I don't know about the law enforcement, but I can see your case there for the gun manufacturers.
Even you see what I'm saying? Because then they're carrying a similar weapon that's probably made by the same person or close to it.
It is, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I believe just about every police precinct that carries AR-15s, they're all government contracted through Colt.
Mm-hmm. Same with Glocks.
Mm-hmm. Although I believe it is our ultimate fear, the Texas Rangers carry SIGs, and they carry SIG 357s.
Yep. God.
But yeah,
Texas Rangers game wardens, boy.
Exactly. But so let's get into the next topic on that one, and again, another massive political witch hunt. We had a ruling that was just handed down here recently, and the
a boy skates
Fannie Willis, out of the Fulton County DA she had essentially issued this, or she had impaneled this grand jury for an investigatory process, to where they would come out and they would investigate these allegations of potential crimes.
Dude.
Although you hear all media out there, and every single network that came across and said this, was that this entire process was for criminal investigations, which is not the case whatsoever.
Nope. Not for criminal.
Nope. The judge actually came down. Well, it wasn't just the judge, but the the Georgia Board of Prosecutors also came down and said that this grand jury has been impaneled for investigatory applications only.
Yep.
So they can
No,
only investigate and look into and gather facts. It's only a fact finding grand jury. They cannot do anything past fact finding. Well, the
which is the only thing they
Willis,
had, because if they really
yes,
had something, here's the thing: if they really had something, then they just go arrest him.
yes, very, very true. Yeah, if they thought that they actually really had this hard evidence on any of these things, they would just
They would
issue an
arrest him.
arrest warrant.
They would issue the arrest warrant.
Mhm.
They would not have opened up everything to show what their case was.
Mhm.
They would have said, "Here's the evidence," taken it to the attorney general, and the attorney general said, "You know what? We got to indict him."
Mhm.
But that's not even nowhere near the case, because it didn't even make it that far.
Nope.
It's at a local county level to where that local DA said, "You know what? I'm going to do this because the news told me to." Basically,
Yeah, or the DNC won.
same
She's
thing,
probably got
same
well,
energy.
yeah. She's probably gotten promised a bid for DA or AG here in the future.
Because think
For a
about
future
it,
term.
they don't have a down ticket. Like, when you think about, so thinking about the state of Georgia, right? They don't have a lot of well-known names. You look at who's running statewide races now, like, these Republicans. Everybody
Mhm.
in Georgia knows these Republicans, but the Democrats, you're like, who is this?
Well, in all fairness,
We're in
that
kind of our own
that
little
all
side.
not just that, but that also comes with the power of incumbency because all of these Republicans' names have been in the news media. Everybody knows them because all the stories are about them.
And they were incumbents. Now, that still being said, though, even if you were to pull from the Georgia Assembly,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really have a lot of names that you can pull from. You can say, you know what, that person could run a statewide race. Like, just putting a campaign hat on, like, you know what I mean, a manager's
Mm-hmm.
hat on, right? They don't have anybody who can say that they got some charisma that they could try to put out. They literally had to take 4 years and send Stacey around the whole world to get enough information to go her to run again.
But yeah, you're not wrong about that.
So
Yeah,
I think this is what this was the whole time. It was just it's a witch hunt, because they know that they don't have
Mhm.
anybody to try to, like, bring up this DA's name. Fulton County is large. It's where Atlanta is located, for those of you who don't know. And if you really want to make a name for yourself in that circle, in the Democratic circle, you got to be out of Atlanta.
that is true. Or catch a major case that goes national, which this is doing. Uh, Another part of this ruling that the judge handed down, which I found was very interesting and very well done, was that he explicitly said that no reports that would be coming from this committee would be allowed to be publicly issued before the midterms. So he's explicitly saying that even if they find or they conclude the grand jury investigations a month before, they conclude it at the beginning of October. Well, per this judge's orders, he would not allow for this report to be released until after the midterms because he sees the implications that it could be seen as a means to uh, politically affect the elections.
Now I gotta go down another rabbit hole, because you know what? They've done it before,
Mm-hmm.
right? We watched them break 200 plus years of tradition at the Supreme Court. If one of those Democrats leaks this report, they need to be prosecuted.
Oh yes,
And I think that's something that we all need to push for.
if it is
If it happens,
concluded, well, if it
I
is
always
concluded
plan
by
for the
them,
worst,
yes,
hope for the best.
yes.
But
Well, I mean, so in all fairness, look at what happened with Trump and Hillary. The whole with Comey coming out and said we are going to be investigating her for criminal acts
well,
right before the election,
well,
but then coming back and saying, well, we're not going to essentially do that. That
well,
was that had the potential or we'll go ahead and say what it is. That affected the election. It did. Whether you had already voted or not, or you had already made your mind up or not, that in some way or another affected your decision of who you were going to vote for.
Both parts, because they're like, here's the other thing too. When he came back and said that there was gross negligence,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't going to do anything, that in itself screams what this was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once again, similar correlation. You have someone who, well, he's an investigator, not a prosecutor, right? But someone who is, in a sense, you can make the case that he's chasing political clout, right? Because you don't do that. That's not what happens. Investigators don't come out and hold press conferences, you know what I mean, or send out letters that aren't, subpoenas to try to get someone to come in and say that this is going on. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like that's the other big thing about the Fulton County thing.
Which is, yes, what she did. She sent out letters to the I believe it was, for one reason or another, 16's jumping in my head, but she sent out these letters to what they're claiming as the fake Trump electors, which, as
16, yep.
in all honesty, though, there is a legal and historical precedent that
For
they
having,
had to have those there in order to continue with the lawsuits that had been filed.
not just that, right? Like, I won't get into that part.
But yeah, so they had to have them there in order to continue with these lawsuits, or ultimately the suits would have been thrown out regardless.
Correct.
So she sent out those letters that said that you have been named in criminal investigation, or we are investigating you for criminal actions, essentially. So that in of itself is another kind of a political step.
Yeah,
that she
because
did there.
that'll happen. Like, do you know anybody who, I don't know, any law enforcement officer or anyone who has ever received a letter from any agency that says, "Hey, we're investigating you, just to let you know."
That's kind of like the whole phone scams that they have going on, where
Oh,
folks
yeah.
will call you and say, I'm with the IRS. We're investigating you for these actions or for back taxes that you didn't pay. You need to go out, buy a green dot card that cannot be traced once the money's transferred over, and pay us this money right now, or we're going to your employers and telling them that we are investigating you for criminal actions.
Yeah, or get a text message that says, "Hey, you have a virus. Click this link to wipe it off."
It's a
okay.
phishing deal. That's essentially what it is.
Okay.
But you also see this at the federal level as well with what Merrick Garland's doing. The whole January 6th criminal investigation that they are doing right now.
Yep.
And we're seeing more and more press conferences that Merrick's doing that, frankly, he keeps saying that, we're not going to talk about any of this. We're not going to talk about any of this. But
No
if
one's
we
above
have
the law.
anything, we are absolutely going to indict, because,
we'll
no
investigate.
one is involved. Yeah.
Like,
but
you know what I mean? Like,
the fact that he keeps and continues talking about it, should the public even really know that there's an investigation going on?
that's how you know that there's not one.
Not a real one anyway. Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, unless like some random smoking gun comes out, that it would have to be massively public.
You mean like illegally purchasing a firearm, having your girlfriend throw it in the garbage can, and then putting it in your autobiography that you illegally purchased it, and then your girlfriend threw it in a trash can.
Or making videos where you sell crack.
Yeah, that too.
And then
explicit, essentially showing that you actually had possession, 100% possession.
Like, and then laughing because you're the president's son, and so nothing should happen to you.
It's funny how those things can link up like that. But yeah, so let's see what Buck has to say.
Oh boy! So
and
me and Buck had a long talk about this, because me and Buck are in the same mindset. The FBI kind of fabricated this. Just say the conspiracy, but you don't like. I don't know. Here's the thing, and either your intel is superb. I mean, like, which to a certain degree, it probably is, but I just don't think fully we're we're there tech wise yet. Otherwise, we would be doing a lot more damage to China, in my opinion. Okay. Or you kind of said, hey, here's some things that need to be done, or you were aware of certain people who were doing this staging of events.
I got you.
I
Yeah.
know that's the long way to say it without saying it.
Yeah. So essentially, what we're talking about on this is before the summer started. I believe it was somewhere around about, we'll call it April, because it was right around before
Yeah,
summer started. April, May, somewhere around about there.
maybe even
Merrick
late
Garland
March.
issued a memo from the Department of Justice that said that there was going to be a severe uptick in what are known as DVEs, domestic violent extremists. They were going to see a very high rising number in these because of the midterms, because of
The
the
hostility.
hand down, well, the handing down of the overturning of Roe, things along that nature. And they were saying this and saying that these domestic violent extremists are, in other words, these white nationalists were going to be the source and the cause of more, or they were going to be America's largest problem going forward through this year. They were going to be the most dangerous elements that America is going to face going through the rest of this year. However, so there have been two whistleblowers that have just come out, and they reported this to so these whistleblowers from the FBI filed these whistleblowing documents with the Judiciary Committee. And essentially what they're saying is that the FBI has given kind of a merit system for folks who will come out and essentially upscale these crimes and things along that nature that they are investigating, and classify them as these DVEs without them actually meeting the classification of a DVE, just so where they can say that it is these domestic violent
Oh, I gotta look
extremists
up
are
that
these
memo.
white nationalists that are being the problem. They're trying to create essentially what would be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I gotta look up that memo. I don't remember that part.
Which part?
That's what the whistleblower had
Well,
said.
so there wasn't a memo about that one. That was a congressional report
Well, that's what I
coming
mean
out.
about memo.
Yes,
Like, you know
it
what I
was
mean?
filed by Jim Jordan, I believe.
Like, because it can be in the report, but like that statement is essentially a memo if it's a
But
whistleblower. But anyway,
yes,
I digress.
they are. So that's what it's saying. It's saying that these people are the FBI. The hierarchy of the FBI is putting together this kind of point-based system to where you would get better promotions, you'll get pay raises, you'll get better positions
By
by
identifying
identifying DVEs that aren't technically DVEs.
almost as if they downgraded what is actually allowed to be qualified as a DVE.
Or
Redefine it.
we'll use the current
Redefine it.
term, redefining, or just flat out lying about it.
Yeah.
Because Christopher Way, the director of the FBI, in a test, and when he was just here recently, a month or so ago, testifying before Congress about what the FBI is doing, he's saying that they are investigating twice as many of these incidents that they have over the past several years. So they're saying it has dramatically increased to a level to where they are investigating twice as many as they have previously. So by redefining this, or by essentially coming out and saying that they are taking a different, they're
They're taking a different
they're
approach.
lying about it.
Yeah.
Well, they're lying
Pretty
about it.
much.
They're lying about what these are, what's going on with this,
To
and they're just
increase
reporting that there are.
to increase more hostility
Yes,
to fit a narrative.
yes. They have essentially politicized, which we knew already. It's just more evidence to the fact that the FBI has now become a political. We'll call it the same thing that happened during the Red Scare with the McCarthyism, essentially. But instead of identifying communists, they're identifying conservatives and looking for them, trying to prosecute them. We saw what happened with with the or with Merrick Garland coming out and saying that they are going to be looking at parents going to these PTA meetings and these school board meetings and
Yeah.
classifying them as domestic terrorists. Well, there was another memo that was sent out about that just last month. There's also been another whistleblower last week that came out and said that they are within the ranks of the FBI, are actually specifically hunting down and targeting conservatives or people who have expressed conservative views over social media, anything along that line, and are removing them from their positions and their jobs.
We're about to get swatted.
There's a good chance of that. But I mean, they did this in the military right after what happened on January 6th. They came in and they essentially, or not just January 6th, but before January 6th, back when they had all of the National Guard troops stationed in D.C. To help protect against all the BLM rioters there. They were systematically going through their ranks. They were looking through all their soldiers' social medias, and they were identifying folks that supported conservative views and telling them, okay, I know you're here already, but you're going home because you don't support what's going on here.
And you could be a liability to start something.
Yes.
See, which is why they start looking at people like us as being a risk, because we're willing to go out and put a podcast together and do all this, and that makes it really kind of terrifying.
Yes, absolutely. The fact that
because they'll do it and no due process.
There is no due process in that regard. Absolutely. But yeah, that is essentially where we are today. Is
we gotta keep fighting the good fight, because that's the only way.
Absolutely. So that brings us back to where we always inevitably can get to.
Back to
the end of each show. Yes. Always make sure that you like and share any content that you come across. That helps us to be able to get higher into the news feed and reach a broader audience than what we would be able to do just on our own. We want to say thank you to all of our supporters, and especially to all of our haters. Please leave us as many comments as you can.
Angry faces work just as well as likes.
I love seeing those. they just give me a big lift. But make sure that you essentially participate on any of our posts that you run across out there. Like I said, it helps us get higher in the news feed, helps us get seen and noticed more. Make sure that you also share that as well. That way that we can reach out, or we can get a newer audience that we don't actually have the explicit affiliations with directly through our social media. We're not just seeing folks that have liked and followed our pages, but folks who have liked and followed your pages are seeing them as well on your page. Make sure you also go to the website, conservativestalk.org, there on your screen. Hit the sponsor tab in the upper right-hand corner and the lower right-hand corner, and help us out with what you're able to. Every bit of it goes an incredibly long way. It really, like we've continuously said, everything's poured right back into the show.
Absolutely.
It helps to increase our production value. It helps to increase our ability to push everything out further and to really kind of grow into what we're doing now. Based upon our metrics, we are the fastest growing conservative podcast talk show / deal in Northwest Georgia. So kudos. But yeah, make sure while you're there at our website, you go and input your email address to get on our email list. That way we are able to keep you in contact, or we're able to stay in contact, keep you up to date on everything that we have coming forward, everything that we're doing, everything we're planning. If you sign up on the email list, we may even drop a hint about the big national deal that we have going on. If you sign up, we can send something out that gives a little bit of a hint.
Yeah.
That way, kind of give you that little inside track into what we have going on here.
That would make me so happy.
Jamie's head's about to explode.
I know it. Awful. Can I do my favorite part now?
So let's do it.
108 days until we beat Stacey Abrams. Boom. Pow, right in the kisser.
I can't wait until the day. We're going to have to find something else afterwards
to fill that slot after Brian Kemp.
After she just gets her tail smashed again, we're going to have to find something else. I'm sure we can do that though. Maybe we'll do a countdown to 24 to when Trump wins presidency back.
I'm good with that.
We'll do a little countdown clock, just continues running down.
Maybe an interim, see, or take a I don't want to take a wage, something to see like when he's going to announce.
There you go. Yeah, we'll do
And
a
then we'll go to 24.
yeah. I see what you're doing on that. But yeah, as always, we appreciate y'all coming on and paying attention and listening to what Jamie and Hal have to say, and we'll be back next week.
See you guys.